You know, a few days back, we had, the news of President Vladimir Putin in our country as a special guest. Of course, the Western media covered it widely, but then what also happened is that Russia Today, RT, one of the biggest offices outside Russia, has opened its newsroom in India. And it's also a strategic signal of India's growing importance in the global information order. What this India-Russia media engagement means and how global news is being increasingly seen from a non-Western lens is what we'll talk about. I have with me Runjhun Sharma. She heads the RT newsroom in India. Runjhun, let me start with, RT chose India for its largest foreign newsroom. From your perspective, what strategic signal does this decision send about India's position in the global news and information order today?
Hi. So while you say that it's a strategic decision and it's looked like that, but also for me, RT India's presence in India, it's both timely as well as appropriate. In fact, it's been about a year, almost a year, that we've been preparing for the launch of RT India. And we've had a presence here in India as well as in Global South for a while now. And it was a year ago, like I said, Moscow told me that, we want to do this full broadcast operations out of India. And I said, are you crazy? 1 year is not enough. Because at that point, we were only a handful people in India. It was also the time when RT was getting banned from certain Western countries, the US and Europe. It had been a while. In fact, during the launch of RT India, just a few days ago, the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, he said that sometimes it's okay to lose a smaller so-called democracy to be able to operate in the largest democracy in the world. And the very fact that India today is nothing but insignificant is because RT has this kind of presence. Also the very fact because India is the most populous country in the world. And I say that not in a good way always, because with being the most populous country in the world also come several challenges. But you also need a foreign office then which matches the scale of the country, but also its complexities and nuances.
Did you spot any specific gaps in terms of editorial, geographic, or the narrative that really pushed RT to open an office here? Do you think that was these elements were part of that decision somewhere?
In a roundabout way, you could say that. But the fact is that India, and this region essentially, South Asia as well, for a while we've seen a very, very dominant presence of the Western media. And this presence has often looked at India with a very biased, with a very patronizing lens. The fact is that RT is here not to always say, wow, look at India, how great the country is, or how great the government is. No, but because India and Russia, they share such a historic bond. It's a very trusted, old trusted partner of India, Russia. So the way Russia looks at India is like an equal. And I say that because I've worked with a Western publication, and I work with a Russian publication. There's a very, very different approach in how the editorial decisions are taken. With the Western media, I feel that white man's burden, it's still very much prevalent, now through journalism. So the white man teaching Indians how to do journalism and how you should behave and how you should be civilized through our journalism. So that really differs because Russia, the way it looks at India, it's a very, very, how do I say, it's a lens which is a very equal lens, not a biased lens, not a patronizing lens, but also Russia understands the country has its nuances, it has its complexities, and it is not for somebody from another land to take out the crux of it. So a lot of times when there are decisions being made in the newsroom, whether the story has to be done or not to be done, this is not a decision that Moscow will take. They will leave the decision on us. And that's essentially also because unlike Western media, many publications, they don't think that they need to dictate to India what India should be doing and how India should be doing it.
I think the nuance that you spoke about with RT, I think they would, you were saying that they would do justice to that which the Western media has not done historically. You know, I want to ask you, India is increasingly described as a swing power in global geopolitics. How does RT India intend to cover India's foreign policy?
So like I said, RT, the way it approaches stories, it is a publication, it's a television channel that never judges news. It's not a filtered, it's not a biased lens. You're talking about India, but let me also give you an example of just how they operate across the world. The global south, for example. Now, if some country in Africa, they have strict LGBTQ laws, which the world thinks is unfair, and they may be. But unlike the Western media, they will not go inside of that country and tell them what you're doing is wrong, and you should not do it this way, and your law should be fixed. Your legislation is flawed. Now that may be, but it is not a place of a publication to go and lecture, and especially because you're global media, you're international media, you don't get inside countries and tell them what to do. Of course you can have opinions, but the very fact that RT now is in India, it will cover everything. It will cover geopolitics, but it will also cover everything else that's happening in the country. But from, again, a lens which is looking at stories as how they are, but not how they should be painted in a way so that India is painted in a particular way. Because perception, that's the entire game, right, with global media houses.
The lens you put to the story is what really defines it. You know, in our news ecosystem, and we had these conversations since morning, have traditionally relied heavily on Western news wires and narratives for global coverage. Do you think with the coming of RT and its biggest newsroom outside Moscow, things are going to change as far as those perceptions are concerned?
If you can give me an example of what kind of perceptions?
Say, I mean, we take for Reuters, we'll always rely on Reuters or a CNN cable, and you know, then our entire ecosystem will run on that. But maybe with your being here with things, do you think, would that make it lesser? Will it make us less dependent on those?
That is the hope. So I'll give you an example. In our newsroom now that we've created, the first thing, as I was speaking to my very, very brilliant team, I realized more than learning, they needed unlearning. Because the local media, it has a way to approach stories, and then there's Western media that has its way of approaching stories. So during editorial discussions, I realized that it's been sort of stamped in everybody's hearts and minds how a story can be approached. Just to give you an example, H-1B visas, you know, Trump is saying Indians should be thrown out, blah, 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 blah. So of course we know how the Western media would cover it, but the local media, for example, and most of the local media, they would do the story from the point of view of how Indians are so upset and their opportunities for going to the US, for example, are being shrinked, are being dwindled, etc. But during those editorial meets, we're just trying to think, and we're trying to tell the team that, okay, there's another way of approaching the story, which is, what if these H-1B visa rules are not such a bad thing overall in long term? Will India's talent then be able to create what it's creating for the US for home? And that's the kind of difference. So it changes the approach of the story. And that's how every story, that's how every approach to a story has been filtered before it's put on air.
You have long experience of covering South Asia from Moscow and from global, summits. In your view, what misunderstandings about India do you see most commonly repeated in Western media?
It's funny because it's only last week I was meeting some people, not from India, and they asked me, where can I find that guy with something in his hand and, a snake charmer? I was like, oh my God, you're still looking for those things in India. India is beyond that. And what's interesting is that each time India achieves new heights, and I'm not saying there are no problems in the country, there are several, but India's had enough achievements. Each time that happens, a BBC or a CNN will try to show India its place. If you're going to the moon, where's your bullock cart? If you're going somewhere, some achievement in space, but you have so many people who are not getting food. Do we have all of those problems? Yes, but why is it that India needs a reminder of that each time India is doing something good? Because of course you're trying to make the Indians feel that you're not worthy of them, but not just Indians, more importantly also the world. Because it's a perception game, but also the perception game then translates into who's investing in India and who's not.
For India is a very inward-looking country. Even when we say we haven't built a global product, is because our domestic demand is so much that we really don't need to look outside, and that has happened to our news content also. So for Indian viewers who see global news as a distant or abstract, so far historically, how will RT India localize international stories? How are you planning to do that?
Firstly, I think in the last few years, there's been tremendous appetite when it comes to geopolitical news, when it comes to international news. People are suddenly interested. They weren't some 10, 15 years ago. But that's also changed because India's position on the global stage has changed. Also, the very fact that we're now looking at a world which is more multipolar rather than unipolar, and which is why the news also has to be multipolar. It no longer can be one-sided news, which has a very one-sided, biased approach. And that's what RT is here to do. Now, both India and Russia, they believe in the idea of a multipolar world, and there's some sort of differences in how that multipolar world is looked at by the two countries. But the fact remains that in order to truly achieve that world, both India and Russia, they've been very, very instrumental. So when the West, for example, imposed sanctions on Russia after the war in Ukraine, and by the way, one would assume that because it's RT and all of that, should I be calling the war a special military operation? I don't, because RT never tells me what to say and what not to say. I will call a war. But coming back to the point that India defying the sanctions, India saying, okay, you know what, if you've been thrown out of the SWIFT system, the international traditional banking way of doing business, we'll trade with you in local currencies. So there started the rupee ruble trade and all of that. And therefore, even if India doesn't want it, the start of de-dollarization. And when the world now is becoming more plural, news must become plural as well.
I have a couple of more questions. You know, the Indian newsrooms operate under intense commercial, political, and speed pressures. As a new entity in India, how are you trying to adjust in this kind of...
I am not even trying, because I know that if we try, there's no way we can compete with the local media which is there. So I tell my team, हम सबसे तेज नहीं हैं. We're not the fastest. We don't need to be. What we need to be is more nuanced. What we need to be, we need to have more perspective. So now we've started our operations, full-scale operations, and there are times that a story is coming and it's more like an update as I see it, and my team's like, okay, let's break it. And I just tell them, no, like nothing is broken. Relax. Let's study the story first. Let's hear how people are looking at it, how different opinion makers or experts or policy makers in different countries are looking at it, and then let's give our views. So it's a more sort of objective view to a story that justifies the viewer's times. We don't break stories just for the heck of it. We're not the fastest. We don't intend to be.
That's a conscious choice. Finally, how do you see RT India coexisting with Indian news channels? Do you view this as is there a subtle form of competition for the audience attention? How are you trying to look at that piece as well?
We would never be able to compete with the local press, and we don't need to, because again, for RT India, the way we intend to approach stories is through a geopolitical lens, but also economy, policies, everything. But we do not want to do what Bhupen was just mentioning. We don't want to have those debates. We don't want to have those fights. We don't want to have discussions on internal politics, which is BJP versus Congress, and one person throwing mud on the other person's face. That kind of drama, as I understand, people have very little appetite for now. They rather listen to something which is more informed. Having said that, I do respect the local media with the kind of branched out, how branched out they are, the kind of presence they have. And it's very important, and it's very relevant. And I hugely admire the stringers at every nook and corner of the country who are actually sort of giving news on a daily basis. They really are the backbone of how the local media operates here. But many of these stringers are also used by the global media, by the Western media, to give them news, but then they color it and make it the way they want to.
So this audience is, they are the ones who really love TV news. That's why they're here. 3 reasons why they should watch RT India, quickly.
I really wouldn't want to sell it, but what I can say it, that you wouldn't be disappointed, and it's a alternate narrative of global news that's not been in India for a while now. And as I understand, as a journalist deeply rooted in the region, I know that India has been aching for it, and India would really want to hear and see that alternate narrative.
So maybe we can say that the moment has come when India will get its due as far as the global lens on India is concerned, and maybe we'll see those stories coming from RT India, right?
Yes, and also the India-Russia relationship. Over the years, the relationship between the two countries has become very government to government. But if you remember, during the Soviet time, that relationship between the two countries, it was much more nuanced. It was there in literature. There was Russian literature in school books, etc., etc. That's all gone. So to bring that back again, you know, like if you go to Moscow today, if you go to any part of Russia actually, they still remember Indians as, oh, Jimmy, Jimmy, Aja, Aja. You know, Mithun is such a legend in Russia. And there's so much people-to-people connect. Like, when I go to Russia, I don't feel alien. It's like we're one people. That also we want to bring back through what we're going to be doing here at RT India.
Great. Thank you, Runjhun, for sharing your thoughts, and all the best to your new responsibilities here. It's a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for coming over and joining us today at NewsNext. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.